The same nation that once witnessed the Red Sea part now stood in the shadow of a towering golden statue, watching as their own children were offered to the flames. This was Baal. To the Israelites, this bronze figure represented the ultimate authority over the environment. Every detail reinforced this claim. The raised arm showed him hurling a lightning bolt, a constant reminder of his power to strike. King Ahab institutionalized this worship after marrying Jezebel, a foreign princess who imported 850 priests to ensure the state mandate was followed across the kingdom. This wasn't a solo deity. Jezebel also established hundreds of priests for fertility idols like Ishtar, saturating the culture with these figures to replace the nation's original faith. People submitted because Baal was marketed as the source of their survival. In an agrarian society, rain was the only path to a harvest. By controlling the weather, Baal controlled the economy and the survival of every family. The prophet Iliyas, or Elijah, stepped forward alone to challenge this entire political and religious establishment. He targeted Baal's specific reputation. Iliyas declared that by the command of Allah, no rain or a drop of dew would touch the ground until he gave the word. This diagram illustrates the strategy. By calling for a drought, Iliyas forced the storm god into a position where he had to perform or be exposed as a powerless piece of metal. As the drought stretched into its third year, the results were devastating. Rivers evaporated and the economy collapsed, while the 850 state priests stood by, unable to produce a single cloud. While the nation suffered, Iliyas lived in hiding, sustained through miracles. Ravens brought him food. He found refuge with a widow, whose jars remained miraculously full. 3 years without rain had effectively dismantled Baal's reputation. With the kingdom facing total collapse, Ahab was forced to agree to a public confrontation. The location for this final test was Mount Carmel, a place that still bears the markers of this history today. The odds appeared impossible. A single, unarmed prophet faced 450 priests of Baal, all under the direct protection of the royal court. Iliyas set the parameters. 2 altars would be built and sacrifices prepared on wood, but no person was allowed to bring fire or a spark to the site. The winner would be determined by a single piece of evidence. Whichever god answered by sending fire down from the sky would be acknowledged as the true one. Iliyas designed this as a public, verifiable test. By removing the possibility of hidden fire, he made it impossible for the priests to use trickery to maintain their influence. The priests of Baal spent the entire morning chanting and dancing around their altar, desperate for a spark that would save their status. Iliyas watched from the side, calmly asking if their god was perhaps traveling, deep in thought, or simply needed to be woken up from a nap. By noon, the priests were frantic. They began cutting themselves with knives and spears, believing that spilling their own blood would finally trigger a response from the idol. Despite the hours of screaming and the blood on the stones, the mountain remained silent. The deity they had used to control the nation's fears had no voice. At the time of the evening sacrifice, Iliyas stepped forward. He used 12 stones to rebuild an ancient, neglected altar dedicated to Allah. To make the test even more difficult, he ordered the crowd to drench his altar with heavy jars of water. He had them repeat this until the wood and the sacrifice were completely saturated. The water was so plentiful that it filled the deep trenches he had dug around the base of the altar, making a natural fire physically impossible. After 3 years of famine and a day of the priests screaming, Iliyas offered a short, quiet prayer, asking Allah to show the people the truth. A massive pillar of fire descended immediately from the night sky, striking the altar with an intense force. The heat was so concentrated that it consumed the wet wood, the sacrifice, and the very stones of the altar, while instantly turning the water in the trenches to steam. Seeing the physical evidence, the nation fell to the ground, admitting that Allah was the true God. The 450 priests were captured, and their influence ended that day. The visual proof on the mountain made the state's official religion impossible to sustain. In a single evening, the credibility of the priests was destroyed by the very element they claimed their god controlled. Following the victory, Iliyas went to the top of the mountain to pray for rain, sending his servant toward the sea 7 times to look for any sign of change. On the seventh attempt, a cloud the size of a man's hand appeared. Within minutes, the 3-year drought ended as a massive storm swept across the land. Even after this victory, Iliyas faced a final threat. Jezebel vowed to kill him, sending the exhausted prophet into the desert, where he sat under a tree and asked for his life to end. The narrative shows a striking contrast in character. While Baal's system demanded blood, Allah provided Iliyas with rest, water, and bread through an angel, strengthening him for the journey ahead. The end of the story saw the complete removal of the idol's presence. Ahab was killed in battle, Jezebel met her end as prophesied, and the temple of Baal was eventually demolished. Baal's influence was based on a specific psychological lever, the fear that this pattern persists today. Modern idols are often the systems or pressures that convince us to compromise our values because we fear losing our status, our security, or our financial standing. The showdown at Mount Carmel serves as a powerful reminder that regardless of the numbers or the state's power, a single person standing in the truth can expose the most elaborate lie.